Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Jama, and I'm the MPP here in Hamilton Center. I'm really honored to be here today to announce a set of housing motions with Hamilton ACORN and with the Accessible Housing Network. The motions are about amending the Residential Tenancies Act to make sure that we're eliminating AGIs, above guideline rent increases. We are also going to be pushing for the creation of collective bargaining rights for tenants, so that tenant rights can be protected and that tenant organizations who are doing the work of trying to protect tenant rights can be respected. And the last set of motions we're releasing have to do with making Ontario accessible. That includes amending the Ontario Building Code and making sure that when we talk about accessibility, we're thinking about building accessible housing, not just affordable housing. All of these motions together are our way of making sure that we're building a Ontario that is accessible and affordable and really getting to the root cause of the housing crisis in the ways that we can. So starting off with the above guideline rent increases, this is something that ACORN has been pushing for a while. Above guideline rent increases are very problematic. It allows landlords to just continue to exploit everyday tenants and increase rent arbitrarily. And so I'm going to pass it off to ACORN to talk about that motion, as well as the motion to give tenant rights real footing in the Residential Tenancies Act.
Thank you, MPP Sarah Jama, for inviting ACORN to speak in support of those motions today. We have 5 members from Hamilton joining this morning. My name is Pauline Roberts, and I've been a member of ACORN for past 2 years. For those who may have not heard of us, ACORN is a multi-issue, membership-based community union of low and moderate income people. We believe that social and economic justice can be best achieved by building a community power for change. We have been organized in Hamilton since 2017 and nationally since 2004. I'm going to share why we support MPP Jama motion and then pass it to fellow members to speak about the impact above guideline rent increase, commonly shortened to AGI, and to need for collective tenant bargaining rights. In a housing affordability crisis, low and moderate income tenants, housing stability is hit first and hit the hardest. In addition to skyrocketing rents, several other factors are fueling the housing crisis. These include lack of strong tenant protections, corporate landlord greed, absence of full rent control, and continued financialization of housing. Through ACORN, low and moderate income community or organization involve ourselves to fight back effectively against corporations that are pushing our neighborhood and from their once affordable homes into the street. On top of fighting landlord directly, ACORN members are organizing the local, provincial, and federal level to push representatives to adopt practical policy tools that strengthen tenants' rights and protect Ontario last remaining affordable housing. Here are some quick facts that are highlighted the crisis renters are facing. 38% of renters are paying more than 30% of their incomes on rent, while 15% are paying more than 50%. Between 2006 and 2016, Ontario saw a 26% decline of rental units for less than $1,000. This decreased by additional 36% in 2016 and 2021. The highest increase has been luxury rental, rented for over $3,000, and which have increased by 87% between 2016 and 2021. AGI are one of the constituents of Ontario loss of affordable housing. We strongly support MPP Sarah Jama motion to eliminate above guideline increase. We have seen our community for these AGI not being used to improve our aging rental housing stock, but instead are loophole in Ontario already weak rent control law to boost apartment curb appeal and property value. The maximum for AGI for capital improvement to a building is an increase of 9% of a tenant current rent, which needs to spread over a period of 3 years. Recently, ACORN did an analysis of AGI data from landlord and tenant board, and which show over the past 2 decades the number of landlord application for AGI has increased 107%. Hamilton ranks 6th overall in Ontario with 116 AGI from 2017 to August of 2022. AGI data of 2022 showed that 78% of AGI application filed are by big corporate landlord or property owned under Ontario business number, like associated with big corporate landlords. The loophole needs to be closed. AGI are not about maintaining the building. They are about taking more money from tenants' pocket. In my own experience, my previous landlord filed for AGI for cosmetic renovation while ignoring much-needed repair, pest control, tenant unit. Now I'll pass to Christine. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Where I was living at 125 Wellington Street, I was living with rats for 10 years. Now I moved to a new place with landlords that doesn't care about pest control or fixing the units. My apartment, it rains in my apartment. I have bugs, and I'm now living with wasps and rain. Go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina, and I'm a member of ACORN's Hamilton Downtown chapter. I'm going to speak about the multiple AGI applications at my building at 125 Wellington Street North and 50 Cathcart. In April of 2021, the building I have lived in for 10 years was bought out by a REIT, a real estate investment trust. Since then, since they acquired our building, the management and maintenance have gone downhill as our rents are skyrocketing. In December of 2022, we learned that our landlord had applied for a 2.08% AGI on top of the regular 2.5% rent increase, this raising some of tenants' rents as much as $70 a month. This will be our second AGI since 2020. With the help of ACORN, we were able to form a tenant association. When tenants came together, we learned that many tenants were very angry with the increases because many people had ongoing maintenance issues. When I went door to door in my building, talking to my neighbors, and I got to see firsthand what some of them were dealing with, I was appalled. Some were dealing with water leaks, non-working appliances, pest control issues, some living with mold for months and even years. I too had a leak in my bathroom which caused the ceiling to collapse, and it took the company 7 months to fix it. And we just recently have learned that our landlord has applied for another AGI, this one for 5.5%, which will now be our third one since 2020. Tenants in the building cannot afford these high rents. Tenants shouldn't be paying for landlords' equity. We don't receive anything in return. Housing is a human right, not just an easy paycheck for financialized landlords. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and I'll now pass it on to Stuart.
Hello, my name is Stuart. I am the chair of ACORN Hamilton's East End chapter. I have watched Sarah advocate passionately for many causes over the years, and I am proud to stand with her today as she once again brings that passion to tenant issues. ACORN Hamilton supports MPP Jama's motion for collective bargaining rights for tenants. Corporations and real estate investment trusts, REITs, are some of the most common types of landlords in Ontario. These are massive entities which own thousands of units. My REIT landlord, a relative newcomer that wouldn't even be old enough to drink, owns 13,000 units in 120 communities spread across 3 provinces. So when my phone calls and emails go unanswered, I can't just head down to the main office. I can't even call someone in the same city as my building in the case of an after-hours emergency. The REIT that purchased my building 10 years ago drastically lowered the expected standards of acceptable property management. These predatory real estate investment corporation types are also the ones doing the most harm to tenants, to our affordable housing stock, and to our communities. Some of my neighbors have faced AGI applications for 3 consecutive years. Not only do none of my neighbors have the resources to mount an adequate defense alone, leaving them with no option but to seek legal aid assistance in a system with dwindling legal aid resources, but many are not aware of their rights and that a defense is even possible. In the first 8 months of 2022, Only 20 landlords filed over half of the applications at the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board, and the top 5 filed over a quarter of them. These large, faceless entities are machines built for the sole purpose of extracting wealth from tenants. They have massive legal teams with what may as well be an endless supply of time and resources to ensure that nothing stops their machine from working in its due course. Tenants are locked into an unthinkable position. Either pay into a system that will continue to do long-term damage to our ability to access housing, or stop paying rent and face homelessness. We are forced to fund the legal team's luxury and lobbying efforts of REITs with virtually no say in the matter. Tenants should be regarded as the largest stakeholders in the rental industry, and it is the result of the lobbying efforts of corporate landlords that we are not seen this way. The power tenants hold collectively is a vital regulatory force against corporate landlords. Our provincial leaders would be remiss to not table legislation that would most effectively allow us to exercise our ability to come together and force REITs and other corporate landlords to take a seat at the bargaining table. Put simply, tenants know what is needed to keep housing affordable. We need the Ontario government to introduce tenant collective bargaining laws, and then we can take it from there. Just as we acknowledge that workers must be allowed to come together and find strength in numbers to protect their best interests from employers who seek to exploit them, so too must tenants be allowed to do the same. ACORN Hamilton supports all of MPP Jama's motions today and calls on all parties to come together and pass these common sense motions to help protect tenants all across the province. I will now pass it off to Kate from the Accessible Housing Network.
Good morning. My name is Kate Chung, and I'm the co-founder of the Accessible Housing Network. And thank you, Sarah Jama, for including us today. The Accessible Housing Network has member organizations, over 70 members from across the country, about half of them in Ontario. And we're demanding that all the building codes in Canada, the National Building Code, every provincial building code, and all the regulations at municipal level be changed to require that all new housing of any kind be universal design. That's fully accessible so anyone of any age or ability can live there. Stats Canada says that 28% of the people in Ontario have a disability, and that does not include seniors. So when you consider the growing senior population, we have a real crisis on our hands. The Ontario Building Code only requires that 15% of the apartments in a brand new building be visitable, not accessible enough to live there. You could come in and have a cup of tea and maybe use the washroom. You could not live there. So we're really needing to have the building code changed to require that 100% of new units be accessible. We know that accessible housing has many benefits, all of which benefit individuals and the government. If you have accessible housing, you'll have fewer falls, fewer ambulance calls, fewer ER visits, fewer hospitalizations, fewer admissions to nursing homes. Maybe that's the problem there in Ontario with the profitability of nursing homes. You'll have less burnout of the caregivers, and you'll actually have people having better mental and physical health, and people with disabilities will be better able to work. They can increase their work hours or get a job if they don't already have one. Everyone needs to remember that we are all only temporarily abled. We could have an accident and break a leg, or get hit by a truck, have a stroke, have a heart attack, come down with MS like my nephew. You could have a child born with a disability. It's an absolute scandal that in Ontario there are people who cannot get their wheelchair through the door of their apartment and therefore are crawling around on the floor in the apartment. There are parents who have to carry children up and down stairs, and this includes carrying teenagers up and down stairs because they can't find a house or apartment that's accessible. We need all housing to be accessible, and I'm including subsidized housing, city-run housing, but also housing at every income level, because it doesn't matter who you are, what your income is. You may someday need accessible housing. You could have a child born with a disability, or you could acquire a disability in one way or another. Seniors, over 90% of seniors are saying that we will not go to a long-term care jail. Why are seniors being locked up, people with disabilities being locked up, as if they're criminals? This has to end. If we have accessible housing with home care, it costs way less, about 1/8. Depends on the stats that you find, but it costs way less to keep people in their own home with home care than to send them to a long-term so-called care jail. So let's change all the laws now and make all housing fully accessible so anybody of any age or ability can live there instead of being discriminated against. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today to talk at this press conference. I think what everybody has highlighted is how, these motions could help make the housing conversation more than just about rent control. There are so many issues, so many people who just can't afford to live where they are. And things like tenant rights, being able to organize, to be able to be taken seriously by your landlord. Things like getting rid of the random AGIs, the above guideline rent increases that you can't really account for because they happen arbitrarily year by year, right? Getting rid of these stopgaps alongside rent control make sure that people can afford to live and stay where they are. And what Kate brought as well forward around accessible housing is important too. We know that the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AOTA, is supposed to make Ontario accessible by 2025, and we're nowhere near that. There are many disabled people who are living in encampments because housing is not accessible. So these conversations together are not the only solutions to fix the housing crisis, but they are a step in the right direction in terms of conversations we need to continue to be having from an intersectional perspective. So I thank everybody for joining today, and at this point I'll open it up to questions to any of our speakers here today or to myself.
Whoever can field this, I don't know anything about tenant collective bargaining rights. Is this a thing like anywhere in Canada and any states across the U.S.?
So this exists in San Francisco. They have some rights there that allows tenants to come together and to bargain for decreased rent. And so this motion is exploratory in nature to say that there should be room to explore what these rights should look like. But it does exist in San Francisco, and tenant rights groups out in BC have been pushing for this for a while. There was actually a similar point in terms of giving tenants bargaining rights in the BC NDP's platform, though they haven't moved on it yet. And so this is just an amalgamation of conversations that have happened, I would say, over the last decade in terms of where we need to be going when we're talking about respecting tenant rights organizations like ACORN and others that have continued to pop up to meet these needs.
And on the AGI stuff, I don't want to be putting words in anyone's mouth here, but it kind of seemed like if the money collected from AGI was spent to properly keep up buildings and not have people live in conditions that you're describing, that you might not be as opposed to it. Would that be like a correct characterization? Am I way off base here?
Well, if they were fixing the units, but they're not fixing the units. Like, we know people that, like for me, at 125 Wellington, I lived there, my sink fell in and stuff. There was things falling apart, and you couldn't get them to do anything. They fixed the garage, they painted the hallway and stuff like that. That has nothing to do with me. Inside my apartment is what I need fixed, not the outside. The outside could look beautiful, but the inside is a disaster, and that's what a lot of us, some people at 125 is living with black mold and stuff, and rats. So these are things that, if they're going to use the AGI for, should be used for, but they're not using it for those things. They're using it for other things, and we never see any money back. They're supposed to lower the rent or give us money back. We don't see those things, and it just keeps going over and over. They take the old AGI from a year ago and just pile on a new AGI, and it just keeps going on with the building maintenance.
To add to that, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say something as well. Also, guidelines, there are annual guideline increases as well. What about the monies from that, right? Why do we need above guideline increases.
Can I answer from here? Do you need me standing on the?
You go ahead.
Okay. So AGIs are supposed to be used for required capital investments that are required to keep the building habitable. They are not supposed to replace general maintenance, which is supposed to be occurring all the time, paid for through rent. They are not supposed to be used for cosmetic increases. So, retiling the lobby and putting in a fireplace just because it looks a little more attractive to prospective tenants, that shouldn't qualify for an AGI, yet time and time again we see these landlords putting these types of modifications in under AGIs.
I guess one more thing on the AGI that I would ask is, like in 2018, PC's come in, eliminate rent control for buildings built after then, say, oh, it's rent control serves as a disincentive for supply. I imagine a similar argument would be marshaled against getting rid of AGIs, and I was just wondering how you guys would respond.
So the simplest answer to that is in 2018, Ford made it so that anything built November 18th or after, or any units inhabited for the first time from that date on, there's no rent control whatsoever. Landlords can increase the rent as much as they want. There's no guidelines in place. And that was 6 years ago now. So because the problem still persists, I would suggest that the rent control isn't the source. Because 6 years later, after all this opportunity to build without rent control, we still have a supply issue.
Plus, it's absurd. It's completely absurd to say remove all control from rent and people can increase rent by ridiculous amounts, right? Like we don't, minimum. Oh my gosh, majority of renters still in specific locations are only on fixed incomes. A majority of us make minimum wages. That's unsustainable. Either way.
Sorry.
I think I also just wanted to add, I think this is part of a larger conversation in terms of, the things that people need to survive in Ontario to be able to live shouldn't be commodified, right? And giving tenants the right to at least fairly bargain for their rights in a way that's recognized as a step in the right direction. Getting rid of AGIs, the idea that the onus is on these tenants every time there's an issue in a property that they don't own is ridiculous. They don't get anything back for the investments that they make into the unit either, right? And I think that the housing market, as it's currently set up, has and continues to be exploitative. And we have people here with real lived experience, with real struggle, who continually have to come to this place again and again and share their stories again and again. So yes, eliminating AGIs is a step in the right direction. It's not the only solution, but it's one of the many things that ACORN has been asking for in order to make the housing situation a bit more fair, alongside the need to have tenant rights recognized so that they can advocate for themselves and not just sit here again and again asking, right? I think we need to move toward investing into public housing as well. That's also one of ACORN's demands, though we're not talking about it as well. And this is one conversation in terms of a bigger picture with flaws in the housing crisis.
On a separate topic, notice you're wearing the fee again today. Do you just expect to be named again today and kind of?
Well, I've already submitted the motions to the clerk. I'm going to go formally submit it. I will be wearing my kufiyeh during question period as per usual.
And another separate topic. Any updates on the suit with the Premier?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, that does it for me. So
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.